So I think we'll get started, please. Yep, that's fine if you'd like to. Yeah, that'd be great. We had a very nice session at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So nice that somebody left their glasses, so there's a glass case with glasses in there. Somebody ought to claim them at some point. And there's also the handouts from that earlier session, if you'd like copies of those. This evening we're privileged to have with us Michael Hicks. He's a professor of music at BYU. I became acquainted with him because I was a missionary in the church history library in Salt Lake. And Professor Hicks was writing a book about the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And I was the librarian that got the stuff for him to out of the stacks for him to do it. And he shared with me a lot of the letters that Richard L. Evans got from all over the country. So as near as I know, Richard L. Evans responded to all of them, although I think he maybe had a form letter, so I don't know. Richard L. Evans' son was on a mission with me in England, and he was what they called then a traveling elder, and he came by our thing, and we had a letter from his father there for him, from Richard L. Evans. And he looked at the front of it and threw it in the garbage can without opening it. I said, "That's from your dad." He said, "It's the talk he gave at the last session of the Tabernacle Choir, and I've heard all of those enough. I don't need to bother reading them anymore." So people are without honor in their own families. I've learned that. So anyway, it's exciting to have Mike here with us tonight. Appreciate his taking this time to be with us, and I know we'll have an enjoyable hour together. At the end of his session, then we will have a couple of minutes pause while the group tunes up, and then we will have a half hour of music to complete this phase of the program. The music is based on poetry, of course. It's hard to sing anything that isn't. Well, it is if you're Michael Jackson and you say bad, 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 bad. I don't know if that's poetry or not, but anyway. So I wrote a poem a week ago, and it was called A Poem for the Modern Age, and it went 0110 001 100. But you have to put the accents in the right place. So anyway, thank you for Michael Hicks for being here, and we'll turn the time over to him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not going to talk about Richard L. Evans, actually. I'm going to read some poetry and talk about some things in writing. I'm speaking as a composer and as a poet and as an editor. I edited the journal American Music for 4 years, so I'm sort of coming from all of these directions. I talked to Lance Larson, who with myself and Susan Howe were in a reading group together for about 4 years and workshopping one another's poetry. And I said, I've never done one of these before. I'm probably under-credentialed and possibly over-prepared. But I said, I'm sure that anything I would say, these poets have heard before. And he said, well, all of these things are things that we've heard before. That's what these are. It's just to remind us, oh yeah, that thing I need to do. So that made me feel a little better. So I thought I would talk about beginnings. But first I'm going to read you some of my poetry, because that's the other thing that Lance said. He says, you should read some of your poetry first and let people know kind of how you think and how you write and the music of your poetry. So I've got a number of things here. Let's start with this one. This is called Museum of Ancient Life. There's actually as you know, down the road a bit, a facility, we'll say, called Museum of Ancient Life. And this is a poem sort of deriving from being there. Museum of Ancient Life. A leaf grins in a rock's face, as if concealing secrets. The quiet of tree hardening to stone, or amber cupping light, careful as water in a child's hands. The shelves of debris proceed by age, Pleistocene, Eocene, Paleocene. A glass geometry cooled by the fluorescent hum of the Ice Age. Beside them, a version of a bird leans from his pedestal, wings canopied as if caught in the updraft of the past tense. As we walk the gallery, I am holding my son's hand the way hominids do in this mural of a family crossing the Bering Straits, trudging from one era to the next on the complicitous ocean. They totter on feet, still learning to bear the upright beast all the way to this place where today my boy ascends the carpet slope toward a forest of bones with wonder still blowing through them. Here, where unpronounceable names struggle to survive. Where could Eden ever have been but here, with no map but ourselves? Here, where the only cost of remembrance is death. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to read a shorter poem here called Benediction. Why do you read this, these veins threading through a leaf, when outside the aspens, let me start over. Why do you read this, these veins threading through a leaf, when outside the aspens fling confetti over the creek bank as if showering a parade of returning heroes? Why do you brush through this moss spreading on a page when outside a speckled cat crouches in the ivy, eyes fixed on a blur of hummingbird? That intuition of the vision behind everything in this unreadable world. Across the creek, a dog chants his meager alphabet at a dragonfly streaking the bare sunlight, freer than the ink leaking from my pen. I am not so didactic as the world itself, which pulls your collar to its face to say that God still talks in his small, confusing voice, teasing you from the poem back to the pond, where skeeters flit all day as if to prove that insignificance walks on water too. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me go to just a couple of recent things. Last summer, I had not been writing poetry for a long time. I've been writing this Tabernacle Choir book, among other things, and I jotted something down in sacrament meeting, because the mind wanders sometimes, and finished it in the second hour and the third hour. And I thought, I like this. This is good. And I had written it sort of based on the notion of Eden. And I thought, I'm going to write a poem a day for 66 days, one inspired by or somehow brought to life by the successive books of the Bible. And I did it. And it was quite a good discipline, I must say. So I'll read you just two from that, and then I have to read you one other one because I was told by Lance, you must read this poem. Okay. So I'm going to read you the last book the one inspired by the last book of the Old Testament, Malachi, and then the one inspired by the last book of the New Testament, book of Revelation. This one's called Last Chapters, and it's numbered 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Every era has its tailpipe. Exhaust sputters from its mouth. Bad burnt oil breath, rancid taste of old gasoline. 2. It is the dead snake, stiff and corroded, jutting from the underbelly of the tree. 3. Keep the garage door open or you'll die from the fumes, unless you kill the engine. 4. Every era ends with the promise of a sequel rattling behind it, like cans on a wedding car. Thank you. And finally, this last one, also 4 stanzas. They're not numbered, but I'd written the poem. You get to the book of Revelation, you're on your 66th day, and you think, this has got to be some big thing. How do you, the finale. So I wrote this, and then I realized, I know the title now. We'll talk about titles in a minute. So it's called The 4 Stanzas of the Apocalypse. The sky has fasted in the desert 40,000 years. Now it's caught a glimpse of barley fields and orange groves, the table the world sets for winter. If clouds could study the earth, they'd find not one soul who'd died of joy. Elephants standing against the wind, whales cargoing the sea with history, the leap of the jaguar in gravity's face. Men's crimes are tilled into the soil. God farms with the faithfulness of tides. Elm trees lift their frail wings, and the world readies itself to ascend. All things alive are the triumph of goodwill. Our ancestors are the cold fronts of the Arctic. Our children are the ecstasy of the equator. At any second, the thrill of sunlight could overrun all our thoughts. Our sins are only fences to climb or kick down. The ghosts of Adam and Eve wave us to shore. Thank you. Now, the one that Lance says I have to read, this is his favorite of mine. And it's the prosiest of all of these in some ways, but I think it gets to the point.
He's into prose right now.
Yeah, that's right. He's sort of veering into that. Wow. This is called Whaling. After ham baguettes and Martinellis at the museum cafe, my new friend Gary drove me to see the 9,000 LPs stored above his garage, all plastic-sleeved, cube-shelved onto 3 walls. A mausoleum of tunes, souls of our heroes floating in mildewy air beside the last unshelved wall, which wore a poster of the pyramids at Giza. The insert for Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, a first pressing of which Gary held up, sliding the vinyl from its sleeve as if to illustrate the title, and declared, "Stone Mint." I said, "I hear it's going to be repressed," to which he said, "Aren't we all?" As if he were lifting a tone arm, as if a pun could retract the sorrow of record hounds everywhere for their black fetish's erosion, its extinction by neglect. Each new pressing means preservation, I told Gary, mummification and resurrection at once. What high priests tried in pyramids, which, like any collection, one keeps excavating and refilling. Gary said he wanted to reorganize by genres with cardstock slats for dividers. Where would you put songs of the humpback whale, he asked. Start a whales section, I said, as if I were some new enlightenment stumbling into the room. Crumbs, vox balaenae, Hovanesses and God created great whales, maybe some Paul Horn. Hendrix belongs there, he said. The feedback is pure whale. So we talked for hours about the ecology of rhyme and about memory's tilting architecture and about how whales can hear each other's songs 1,000 miles away, one ocean to the next, which led us to our various ex-lives, most now capsized or collapsed like waves. And soon it got dark, though we knew the physics of planetary surfaces and knew that it's always day somewhere on Earth, that even as we spoke, a sunlit Giza was tipping its worn styluses onto heaven to play the B-side. Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it so much. I'm talking about beginnings here. This is something you've dealt with a lot, I'm sure, but I'm fascinated by how you begin a work of words. And so I want to start with three favorite openings. Well, two, and then this sort of larger category of threeness, I'll say. So the first one is this opening line of John Cheever's short story, Montraldo. The line is, "The first time I robbed Tiffany's, it was raining." So tell me how that works. You see the title Montraldo. I don't know, I was sort of put off by the title. It's like, I don't know, what is this about some little Italian town or something? I don't know. But that line worked. The first time I robbed Tiffany's, it was raining. Why does that work? I'm sort of asking and pulling this.
Startling.
It's startling. In what way?
Well, the first time.
Yeah, exactly. So the notion that this narrator robbed Tiffany's, and to say the first time, yes, yeah.
It's visual to
Yeah, and of course, it's so visual, right? That's what, yeah.
The main idea seems to be that it's raining. It's not so important that
I know, exactly, because that's the last thing in the sentence. It's like, okay, it's like the first time I robbed Tiffany's, it was raining, and you're thinking, what is going on here? It's an incredibly rich line for all those reasons. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Brother Aspen, if you would.
I was just going to say that it gives you an idea of who the character is.
Yes.
It gives you some idea of setting with the rain and Tiffany's, and it gives you some kind of a goal where you can learn how to rob.
Yes.
You've got all these things that add.
You want to know, where is he taking me this? I say he, you don't even know if it's he at the beginning. But it is such a remarkably efficient line. It gives you so much initially. The next one here, Steely Dan, from the song Haitian Divorce, which, by the way, talk about a great title for a song, Haitian Divorce. But listen to the opening three lines of this. They rhyme. Babs and Clean Willie were in love, they said. So in love, the preacher's face turned red. Soon everybody knew the thing was dead. Now, three lines. I've got a huge story there. I've got so much coming out of those three lines. I'll say them again. Babs and Clean Willie were in love, they said. So in love, the preacher's face turned red. Soon everybody knew the thing was dead. So, I'll poll start with this group over here. How much are you learning through the efficiency of those lines? Because there's a whole story. There's a whole story. First of all, Babs and Clean Willie, that's telling you a lot, those names, right? And we're in love, they said. Then the second line, so in love, the preacher's face turned red. So what's happened? Yeah, they're making out. They're getting married, and they're being very demonstrative, we'll say. And then that next line, soon everybody knew the thing was dead. So you've got, I mean, you've encompassed character and a whole narrative that is very relatable, I'm sure, for all of us that we've observed or endured in just those 3 lines. More about those in just a second.
When you have the title too,
Haitian Divorce. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, well, you know, and it's like, well, Haiti is in here somewhere. We get the divorce, we can see the divorce coming. Well, how does Haiti fit in? And the rest of the story unfolds in successive verses. Now, I wrote here Linda Pastan, pretty much anything. I thought, okay, let's get to poets. And I thought, well, I favored male authors here at the beginning. Many of my favorite poets, as I'm sure yours are women. And so I looked at Jane Kenyon opening lines, and it's like, well, it's not really great opening lines. I love the poetry, but they don't grab you in that way. I looked at Lucille Clifton poems. Same experience. It's like, I love these poems, but I hadn't really thought about it. And Anne Sexton. I love Anne Sexton's poetry, but I wasn't getting a whole lot in the first line. But then I went to Linda Pastan, and I'm telling you, she's got the greatest opening lines, just like this. So I'm gonna act like a magician here. I've got this collection of hers, Carnival Evening, and I'm just gonna say, okay, tell me when to stop.
Stop.
Sorry. Just tell me when to stop. Okay. So here's the opening line. No bigger than a thumb and palest green, a tree frog has stowed away on one of the plants my husband brought inside for winter. And on the opposite page, you give me fuchsias for my birthday. They're strange bell-like flowers, improbable shades of red, the color of Buddhist temple bells. And, okay, let's do it again. I just want you to see the power of a great opening line. Her poetry, it has this effect, and it's not better poetry, but the opening lines make you go, wow, I gotta keep going with this one. So I'll go over to this side. So Paul.
Yep.
Tell me when.
Good.
Here?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. This sometimes you get a poem where it's just a one sentence. So, and that's the one right here.
That's Paul for you.
So I'm gonna not read that one, but you see off the picture. I remember in the week of the dogwoods, why sometimes we give up everything for beauty, lose our sense and our senses as we do now for these blossoms sprinkled like salt through the dark woods. Anyway, sorry, Bill. I wasn't insured for that, so. I love to think about how things open, and I think that I have that in some of my poems, not in that LP poem, the last one, but I think that the line, the sky has fasted in the desert 40,000 years. So I really worry, and I think I learned this a little bit from Linda Pastan. It's like, this has to start strong so that you're moving on. Now, what I've given you here in this 4 methods are just some thoughts about starting. And the first one, you can see I tried to give a little bit of tantalizing names for these too. So bad reading, channel surfing, amputation, and the flip. Okay. The first one, this is two parts to this one. First, this is a Frank OHara thing. Frank OHara would take poems in German or other languages that he didn't speak And you know what he did with them? He would read them as if they were English. He had to get ones that he didn't know what they meant in the language, and then get from the sounds and the potential cognates of that, come up with words and images and things to start with. And sometimes go a long way in a poem from that. So I put on the reverse of this page this thing from Heinrich Heine. This is and Sarah knows this well because she's probably, well, you haven't sung this from Dichterliebe, but this is one of the better known songs from Schumann's song cycle, Dichterliebe. Well, I won't read it in the German, but who here doesn't speak German? I assume the majority don't speak German. Okay, so I'm going to ask her name tag server now. She's incognito. She's, the paparazzi, it's fine, they know what to do to that. But in that first line, you look at that first line, what are words that come to you as you're reading this as though it were in English? Night, yeah, night and bright. Of course, night, if I say night, it's not actually night, but you look at that, night. And you can, if you're Frank OHara, or you want to open your mind up, you might look at that Hertz and think Hertz. I know that it's like a rent-a-car, and and Bricht, maybe Bright there, the Bright Hertz rent-a-car at night. I'm saying it growled. I'm reading backwards. The Bright Hertz rent-a-car growled at night. Now, I mean, it seems sort of, maybe too free-spirited. I don't know, but if you start with that in your mind and say, okay, well, I'm thinking about this. This Hertz rent-a-car. Why is it Hertz rent-a-car? And so you can do this with lines. You can do bad readings of foreign language to just sort of trigger ideas, to trigger words that you can keep or throw out, or whatever. It's, we're all just shuffling sounds here. But I found this to be quite helpful from time to time. I won't disclose any particular poem I've used this with, but it's sort of like Ben Johnston I studied with, a great microtonalist composer who told us in confidence one day, students, that one of his pieces, a well-known piece, very serious composition written in just intonation and so on, had been based on the Three Bears story. And we all said, which one? And he said, I'm never telling you that. Why? Because I don't want that to be the Three Bears piece, So but anyway, if you write a poem about a Hertz rent-a-car, I know where you got that from. Anyway, I say, you can go through lines. You can just look at lines anywhere in other languages. If you don't know the language, and then say, what comes to mind when I see that? Because these letters recombine and so on. Anyway, I do think, too, that maybe this isn't an openings thing, but always remember to see if you can use a proper noun as a verb. So give me an example, not of using it as a verb necessarily, but a proper noun that comes to mind. If I say proper noun.
Google.
What's that?
Google.
A what?
Google.
Oh, Google, sorry. Okay. Well, that's already a verb. That's the problem there. But that's happened with Google, yeah, absolutely. So, but if I say that I got home and my dad Hurricane Katrina'd me, I mean, that's, do you know what I'm saying? I'm taking that thing, and it's kind of meaningless in a way. I mean, it's not a real verb, but that noun, that proper noun, can just bring a cascade of connotations into the hearer. So give me another. Tsunami. Yeah. And so How about a proper name, though, of a person? You were going to say something. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What's that? Donovan McNabb? I don't know who that is. Oh, okay. That's why I don't know who that is. Okay. So, but how would you use that? How would you?
That's what said good luck.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Just, I mean, he trumped that situation.
Yeah, well,
Something along those lines.
well, yeah. That Trump has. There are words that, because of the current administration in the White House, are used up for how long I don't know. Trump obviously, as a verb, is used up, but adjectives like tremendous, and even sad, that's the one that's bigly, yeah.
So maybe something like the mom and pop businesses had all been McDonald's.
Had all been McDonald's, yes, great. And you get that, you know what I'm saying? You get, and the what's great is that it's both less precise and more precise at the same time, if that makes sense. This is a thing that I'm trying to bring in the musical references here, as Bill had asked me. This was a thing that that Mendelssohn said when he was asked by a fellow Marc-André Souchet, why do you have these songs without words? I mean, the words would make them clearer what you're intending, as you would think with a song. And he says, but you don't understand. What I hear in music is not too indefinite for words, it's too definite. It's too definite for words. And I think that taking proper nouns and using them as verbs can be that way. It can be more definite in a way. Even though at the same time it seems it's what exactly do you mean by that? But it's sort of like, well, we get it. Everyone gets it in their own way. All right, so channel surfing. I had an Israeli composer that I spent some time with, Joseph Tal was his name, and he would say, and it's, all music must begin with a contradiction. That was. And I took that to heart in writing music I still do, I guess, in many ways. But all music must begin with a contradiction. And so I like that notion that an opening line should have some contradiction. I think that Cheever had that, and it's been referred to in a way. It's like, first time I brought Tiffany's, it was raining. And it's what's the connection between those two things? You know what I'm saying? I pulled this one out. This is Charles Bukowski here. He has a book called On Writing. It's an anthology of pieces that he'd written, and so on, letters and whatnot. And I love this line. The words should rip the paper a bit, make sounds, be simply clear and bold and humorous and suicidal. And I'm going along and saying, okay, great, it has a sort of boilerplate feel to it, but then I get to that suicidal, it's like, oh, okay, where are you taking me? There's just this sudden breach into darkness with that. But also, not just within a line, but I think more important, in connecting lines. So the first two lines, if you start with a real contradiction, that is to say, completely different kinds of things, then you've set up the potential for a kind of friction that is going to generate energy, potentially. Now, so here's what I want to do. So I want to go towards the back of both sides. So on this side, tell me, so you in the back row of this side, if you would. Yeah, sorry. So I want you to think a line about an article of clothing. Okay, don't say it, but just any line. Okay, And then I would like you, also in the back row this side, no, one more behind you, to think about an idea that you disagree with or don't believe. Okay? Okay, so what's your line, or what? Or,
The shoes disapproved of the cats.
what's the?
The shoes disapproved of the cats.
The shoe disapproved of the cats. Okay, and your line is? just some statement about, okay, the shoe disapproved of the cats.
Dogs should sleep on the bed.
What's that?
Dogs should sleep on the bed.
Dogs shouldn't sleep on the bed? Should sleep on the bed. Okay, well, those sort of converged in an interesting way because of the animal connection there. But if you started with those two lines, which are, you know, they're just coming out of different minds, and you can have them even be further apart. It's like, okay, I'm not connecting these in any way, but by laying those out one after the other, the listener, the reader, is going to say, okay. And what happens to you in doing that, taking two lines, and these could be lines, I'm serious that you've jotted lines in notebooks and just say, okay, okay, that's a good line. I like that line. And this is another one. They have nothing to do with each other, but if I lay them one after the other, where will that take me? And I think you would be surprised where that might take you. Now, you might end up discarding both of them, but maybe the thing in between them, the connection in between them, either that you leave to the reader or that you've inferred for yourself, can give you a starting place, an interesting starting place. I think of Robert Bly. I think he's a good example of this. I don't have any at hand, but you know, in his ghazals especially, you might have things that are really quite different, one line to the next. And I find myself immediately tantalized, like, okay, how's he going to do this? How's he going to spin this out from these? Okay, so channel surfing, I say that. It's like, you know how, and by the way, you may have done that, this channel surfing. Maybe it's just me, but you know, where you flip from one channel to the next, and they're completely different things. They have no connection to each other, but you make a connection. And sometimes there's a funny connection that goes from one to the, you know what I mean? The juxtaposition is funny, even though it wasn't designed that way. Anyway, yeah.
An example of that is in the old days.
The old days, yes.
Before anybody was born. On the early radio,
Yes,
they had a
yes.
program where they would just push the push buttons.
Oh, really?
and from different speakers.
Yes, yeah,
And one speaker would say something, you push a push button,
yeah.
and it would give a counter. And what you're constructing in your talk here is a hook.
Yeah,
You're hooking in so that they want to read more.
Yeah.
What's he talking about?
yeah. I think that channel surfing can be a great way to start off. You have to trust you have to say, okay, I'm not trying to make the connections here. I'm just throwing these out. And so, all right. Well, amputation, that's a harsh word. But this is a big thing, of course, that you're always doing. You're always cutting. You're always talking about how to cut things down. Now, I put a number. I jotted down a number. Well, you've got beheading. you've got cutting the feet off. You've got cutting out, sort of eviscerating, and so on. I mean, it's sort of a grisly catalog here of things that I have. But I'll just mention a few. First of all, the beginning that you write is often not the real beginning. Who knows if that opening line of John Cheever's had initially been, I was raised in blah, 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 and so on, and I grew up in the south side of the city, and giving you the backstory, and then the second paragraph started, the first time I wrote, you know what I'm saying? This is something that you're probably well versed in, but most of the time you're writing initially to find out what it is you have to say. And then you lop that off. I do this so often with composition students in music. They'll write this piece, they'll be going along and stuff, and I'll say, okay, now you need to cut the first 20 seconds of this piece, because here's where it really starts, and so on. So remember that, that's the beheading part, okay? That's sort of amputation. But also the ending. A lot of times we go too far in the ending. We want to give the wrap up or something, and you just need to cut that off. It's an old Hemingway thing. You know, he talks about this in A Movable Feast. He's talking about his short story called Out of Season. And he says, I omitted the actual ending of the story, which was that the old man hanged himself. But I did it on my new theory that you could omit anything if you knew that you omitted, and that the reader would feel more than they understood. And I think that concept is a great one. As you take things out, they're feeling more than they understand. Now, I mentioned this eviscerating in the middle. This is the kind of thing, this was actually an Arnold Schoenberg thing. He talks about this when he's talking about leaving things out, but keeping it comprehensible. So if I say to you, as he said, because the roads get slick when it's raining, you might have to set out early. Those two portions of the sentence make no sense, and yet they make complete sense. Do you understand? What do you mean you have to set out early because roads get slick? And you're filling in the connection, right? Which is what? You have to go slower because the roads are going to be slick. But you don't have to say that. And so sometimes you need to just chop out the connection that you had made in the middle. And then, of course, syllables. Go back to our opening lines. The first time I robbed Tiffany's, it was raining. So it's all words of one syllable except for Tiffany's and raining. And go to the Steely Dan. Babs and Clean Willie were in love, they said. So Willie's the only two-syllable word in that sense. So in love, the preacher's face turned red. Preacher is the only two-syllable word, all the rest one syllable. Soon everybody knew the thing was dead. Everybody is the only multisyllabic word in there. So you do this all the time. I mean, I do it so consciously now in all kinds of prose writing, and if you don't do that, go back and say, okay, I've got to cut these down. I always tell students, never multiply syllables and subtract meaning. It's a very common thing. It's an incredibly common thing from journalism to, obviously, bureaucracies. And then, of course, throw in adjectives here. I went 3 years, I think, without ever using an adjective in a poem. And it's a very good discipline. You start chopping out the adjectives, and then you have to resort to other things or resort to nothing. But you'll be amazed how that sort of little digital amputation, digital in this sense, works. Just cut them. I mean, cut them out or don't use them. Just say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to use adjectives. You don't have to go, a number of years as I did, but I think you will find great vigor in doing that. Then the last one, the flip. And here I'm going to pass out a poem. But first I want to just make the comment, and ask you for a couple of examples. The flip here is just that you start with the opposite of something that is a commonplace. You start with the opposite of something that's a commonplace. So what would be... Oh, it's Bill. So what's a cliche or a motto or a conventional saying, a well-known quotation?
A
Cat has 9 lives.
A cat has 9 lives. Okay, so when I say the flip, there's different ways to handle that particular one, because you can change the number, of course. If you start out saying a cat actually has 10 lives, or a cat has, I've only found 8 of the cat's 9 lives. You know what I'm saying? Or you don't want to just say a cat doesn't have 9 lives, but you take that thing and you flip it somehow. What's another one? Haste makes waste. Okay, which is nice rhyming poetry in itself, right? Haste makes waste. But so what? How would you flip that? It's hard to do because it's a little rhyming thing, but you could say haste. I find that haste makes abundance. You know what I'm saying? So you're just standing the thing on its head, and then when you do that, haste makes breakfast. When you do that, it kind of goes back to the contradiction thing I said earlier. But you have somewhere to go with it. Now, I'm going to pass out and with Sarah's help here. So this is a poem this wasn't in my Bible set. Okay, we'll send a few of those around. More here. There's plenty of these. So this is a poem I wrote called Psalm 23.2. Let's see. Oh, I don't know. You passing up on this side yet? No. Are you just on that side, Sarah?
Yeah.
So far? Okay. I'll just pass it there. Psalm 23.2. And this started with me wanting to say, I wanted to say, well, the opening line, you, Lord, were never my shepherd. Now, any more? Now, I wasn't saying that, it's not like I want to blaspheme or something, but it's like, I that phrase is too familiar, and I wanted to say the opposite. And doing that, here's what happens, and I want you to see in this poem the steps that you take from that point on. So, you, Lord, were never my shepherd. I never felt your hand tousle my woolly head as I trotted the lawn beside a lake. Never heard you blow your pipes in the pasture as I vanished into sleep. Some days you've been a shadow chiseled on my porch. Other days only smoke I couldn't exhale. How often have I bumped my knees on the floor like spilled apples hitting pavement? How often have I fingered through the good books and found only bones of your secrets? It took 1 wife and 2 near misses, 4 kids walking onto the planet brushing history from their heads, a tour of zip codes and business cards enough to pack the bowl of our jigsawed lives, till I found you, no shepherd, just my heart dilated off the charts into some new experiment of joy. Without looking it up, I learned what behold means, because I beheld and saw. Microbes are your blood flow, crickets your power grid. Every cornstalk is a fountain, every peach a bell. The whole earth is your banjo, strung with 1 billion stems. You milk the universe and it sprays out stars. So, I didn't know where this was going. I didn't have a plan for it, but I just started with that one thought. So what happens? So I say, you're not this. And then I have to elucidate, because you're not this, you don't do these things, so I've not experienced these things. So you take the negative. Say, I'm rejecting that metaphor for these reasons. Then the next stanza, it's what I have felt from you, what you have been to me. See? And of course, you're coming up with imagery, you're coming up with all the things that you do in poetry, and laying those out. And then the next stanza is saying, here's the journey I had to take to learn you. All these things, okay? Here's my method, you might say, my process of arriving at these defining metaphors, I guess, or these things I'm saying about God. And then the last stanza, I don't even know what to say about it, but by the time I'd gotten to there, it's like, okay, now I'm going to lay it out one by one. Here's these things that are all sort of rural, farm-ish images. You see what I'm saying? It's like, okay, so I'm going from the shepherd, I'm taking it to the ranch or the farm, but it's in that same vein. But here's what I see all around me. And you see how this sort of unfolded from that opening flip. And so if you haven't done that before, and I'm sure you're all experienced in here, try it again. Take some commonplace thing. Could be a scriptural thing like this. It could be anything, any well-known quote or idea or maxim or motto, like I say, and just flip it and just say the opposite or challenge it in some way. And then you have to specifically challenge its components, at least if you're doing it this way. And then you assert the positive aspects and so on after that. It's really a lot of cataloging here. This thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, and so on. Both the negative and then the positive. Now, we're about out of time here, and I'm just the warm-up guy for the band. But I just put here a bonus track. So I'm just pointing out the real first line isn't the first line, it's the title. Now, does the title come first or does the title come after? And the answer is yes. I'm behaving like a BYU religion professor. That's the kind of thing we do all the time. Is it this or is it this? Yes. But it's true. There are times when I think most of the time you write the poem and then you write the title. But sometimes you start with the title. I'll give you a couple quick examples and then I'll close here. This is one, and this comes from a Lance Larson critique of this poem. I'm going to read you the poem. I'll just read you. This was published in an anthology of poetry about horses. And I actually wrote it thinking, oh, they want poems about horses. I have no connection with horses whatsoever. But I'll see if I can tap into recollections from California. And so I wrote this poem, and the title is The Question of Remarkability. In the middle of the 20th century, in the middle of the highway from Fresno to Chowchilla, through fields cut and bundled like farm girls' hair in summer, up the porched shade banks of a pass that divides federal land from big ranches, a 46 Ford pickup pulls one horse in a slant-load trailer. That's one sentence. His head hangs out the window, a whole room for a harness, swaying like a ballad at each turn. He keeps still as foothills gallop across his eyes. He grazes on wind. A wheeled gallery, more statue than animal, more noun than verb. And as the truck leans inland, the pastors study this parody of the Pony Express. All this could be a painting, but you would lose the nuance of pavement. Or it could even be a sonata, but you might miss the scruff of mane up the middle of his sloping back. For some scenarios, words work best, or simply to have been there, whichever lasts longer. So this was called Horse Trailer when I wrote it. I thought, horse trailer, I'm just stating it directly. And Lancey says, I like the poem a lot, but the reader needs to know what's remarkable about this experience. Why are you telling us this? Why are you giving us this scene? So it's really, that's the question. What's remarkable about this? And so I thought about rewriting it. I liked it the way it was, and so I retitled it The Question of Remarkability. and they loved the title. They said, wow, great title in this poem, but it just came up from that question. So the title was an afterword to it. Now, in writing this Bible set, and I'll just end with this, sometimes the title came first. This was a sort of obvious one. I got to Job, and it's like, what do you do with Job? I mean, you have, the whole book is a poem, and so I said, okay, I'm writing Job's to-do list. That was the title, and then I'm just writing things down, you know, that I thought were humorous or clever or, you know, had fun aspects to them. That would be I'd edit it down. Here's what it is: Job's to-do list. Buy skin cream. Cancel kids' subscriptions. Rent out the barn. Google injustice. Put mortician on retainer. Stop keeping diary. Hire new theology tutor. Audition for Russian novel. Rake leaves into gutter after whirlwind. Get new friends. Well, that's when it's like the title is, you know, that's what you start with. Or another one. This other one here. No, not that one. Oh, I'm not seeing it. But there are some that are sort of long, convoluted titles, you know, study. So, well, I think of, you know, one of the great titles, and you should think about this as an opportunity. What B.H. Fairchild did, you know, his book, Occult Memory Systems of the Lower Midwest. I think that's the title. It's the title of a book, and it's the title of a poem. I think I've got that right. Occult Memory Systems of the Lower Midwest. And you hear that, and it's like, wow. It's just the title of a textbook, because occult memory systems have to do with water transfer and so on. Lower Midwest, or it's like an article title. And sometimes I'll see a textbook, a real old textbook, and they go, wow, there's a great title there. Because there's just so much in it that you can just start spiraling off there. But here's another example where it just ended with the title came last, and I'll close with this. It's just a short poem. So this was Joel. This is based on Joel. Joel's not in the title. Joel's not anywhere in the poem, but that's how these worked. Is like something in it, you know. And Joel, if you know the book of Joel, it's a lot of doom and disaster prophesied, and in sometimes very poetic language. So this one was named after the fact. The first line is this. I'll go back to the first line. The first line I wrote was, when it's raining grasshoppers, you can write the world its death certificate. I thought that's a good opening line. Now, when you have that, what do? You start talking about grasshoppers and so on. So it becomes a catalog. But the poem is called The Tailor. Now, here again, it's like the tailor, and then it's raining grasshoppers and so on. And it's like, you know what I'm saying? That in itself is giving you a nice conflict. I think that it's like the tailor, when it's raining grasshoppers, you can write the world its death certificate. They leap into a cloud from the deserts of Sudan. They leap from the Argentinian pampas. They leap from the Javanese rice fields. They leap from cliffs of the Rockies. They leap from the gardens of Stratford-upon-Avon. They leap from the Queensland outback. They fall like flakes from a chainsaw into our morning coffee. They fall into our disheveled beds. They fall into our soapy bathwater. They lodge in our collars like a tailor's fingers checking the fit. To him, it's never tight enough. And there's the Tailor comes in, and it's like, okay, the title of this poem is The Tailor, because that's kind of what it's all about, sort of. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with me and hearing these thoughts, and I hope you'll find some things useful and that you've enjoyed the poetry.